Hey, welcome everybody. We are live now. There's James. Yep, and we'll give people a couple minutes to maybe chime in or connect in. But we are live on Facebook Communitas North America. I'm Leon Longard. This is James Cola here, and we are starting this new thing, doing these live streams, talking about Communitas North America, talking with people about what they're doing, what they're passionate about. Give you a chance to get to know some of the people that are involved with Communitas and the things that we're passionate about. And what we want you to do also, just while you're chimed in, type in a comment, say hi, let us know where you're watching from. We want to make this interactive. And we call it In the Room because it kind of matches the ethos of what Communitas is like. It's a very relaxed, relational ethos that we have among our people that are involved in Communitas. And we just want to make it be like a place where, you're sitting around, like we're just sitting around a table, have a cup of water, a cup of coffee, tea, whatever you want, just to kind of chill, talk for a few minutes, share what's important, what we are excited about, what we're passionate about. And I'm going to start out with James. Is going to introduce himself and talk about what he's doing.
Hey everyone, I'm James. Just want to start sharing some of my personal history with Communitas and what I do now and what my role with Communitas is today. I have been around Communitas for a relatively long time in relationship to how long I've been alive, but my dad planted a church with Communitas, planted a home church with Communitas in I think 2008. So I grew up in relationship with a lot of Communitas people just as a kid. And then in my early adulthood, my dad mentioned a job opportunity working with people living on the streets in Santa Barbara. And I had wanted to live in Santa Barbara a lot of my childhood, and had a passion for just building relationships with people who were experiencing homelessness. So my dad mentioned that job opportunity. I was so excited to apply for the job. And I didn't even realize it when I was applying, but the organization I worked for, which was then called Uffizi, was one of the first projects that Communitas started in North America. And I had such a good time working for Uffizi, and it was probably in like 2014, 2015 when I started to connect with more of the Communitas people. At that time, I was getting to hang out with Communitas people who were visiting Jeff Schaefer, the founder of Uffizi in Santa Barbara, and I was getting to meet a lot of Communitas people in Thousand Oaks. And as an adult, just realizing I loved who Communitas was and was excited about if there was ever going to be a possibility for me to partner with this organization. And it was in 2019 when Jeff Reinhardt, who's currently the president of Communitas, reached out to me and said that Communitas was doing a cohort on the book Dynamic Adventure, which Leon has got behind him.
Funny.
But they were doing a beta version of this learning cohort through Dynamic Adventure, and Jeff asked me if I wanted to be a part of it, and I said, Jeff, I'm not in a place where I'm considering church planning or anything. And he said, yeah, but we would love to have your input and have you participate in that. And so I got to join that cohort. And at the end of that cohort, Jeff and Mike Cooter both reached out to me and said, if we can have you partner with Communitas, we would be stoked to see that happen. and I was like, I don't know what that looks like. But they just extended an invitation, and since then I've gotten to join Leon on our mobilization team, and that's been really fun. And we've developed this and developed an online learning cohort that has yet to launch for Communitas, but it exists. It's run a beta.
It'll come soon. It'll come soon. Yeah.
And that's kind of my story with Communitas and what I'm doing with Communitas now.
Cool.
I guess I should also say I'm here from Phoenix, Arizona. That's where I'm based. I manage a coffee shop that I really love. Get to work with some great people.
Cool. And I think I'm glad that you did say yes to Jeff and Mike Cooter, because I like having you on the team. It's fun to have you be a part of the team. And he's doing some really cool stuff with his coffee shop and things like that too. So, my background connecting with Communitas, I connected back in 2011, a little bit after Brent, James' dad, connected. Was already starting to explore missional type church planting, incarnational church planting, doing some outreach work related to that. Had started a small community in our house already. And as I was kind of feeling out where this fit, I felt like I was looking for a network to connect with. In 2011, I connected with a couple of people who were connected with Communitas, and it was just an exciting thing for me to find that there were others in the world that thought the way I did about how we can be the church. Hey, Daphne, I see you here. She's popping in. We got Diana and Brent watching too. Anyway, so we connected. I connected in 2011. We have been since then. I've been leading a missional community here in Indianapolis, where I currently live, called Diakonos Community, people that serve others. And we started out initially starting a food pantry in one of our local high schools. But then eventually our focus switched to people that were experiencing homelessness and people who were transitioning out of homelessness. We ended up with communities that were meeting in apartment buildings where people were transitioning out of homelessness. And then the other thing I got involved in locally was leading a team that's launching a tiny house village here in Indianapolis for people transitioning out of homelessness. And then about a few years ago, I joined the North America team, getting involved in mobilization. That's James started to work with me as well in that. And now am actually at the point of transitioning to being the point person for North America and helping develop our reach throughout North America, US, Canada, Mexico. Justin, hello. Good to meet you. So, hey, while we're going to go next, James, why don't you tell us a little bit about what Communitas, kind of the history of it. Some may not be aware of it.
I'm going to do my best to share some background for Communitas. The beginnings of Communitas really started with a guy named Linus Morris, who was regularly taking trips to Europe, just trying to build the kingdom amongst young adults in Europe through basketball camps. And as he was spending time in Europe, Linus really felt a need for the church, like new expressions of church in Europe. Europe was pretty thoroughly post-church at that point, from what I understand. And Linus was just eager to think creatively about what the church could be so that it would connect with people and welcome people in Europe again. And it was 1980 when he and his family moved to France and planted the first church that was a Communitas church Communitas, or it was Christian Associates International at that point, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
And they really had an emphasis on loving their neighborhood well and contextualizing the church for the place they were in. And as Linus was doing this, people were falling in love with what he was doing. And it was in 87 when they planted the second Communitas church in Amsterdam. And Communitas just found a lot of success with this like model that emphasized loving your neighborhood, organic community, and like creative contextualization. And it wasn't until like roughly 2005 when two different people expressed interest in the US starting projects with Communitas. And that was my dad and Jeff Schaefer. And my dad was looking to start a church plant, and Jeff Schaefer did not want to start a church, but he launched a missional order.
Yes.
He launched a missional order that has done so many incredible things in Santa Barbara. They have worked with and partnered with people living on the streets and partnered with the city. They've done a lot regarding first generation families that have immigrated to the U.S. And worked a lot with the city as they've tried to address the trafficking problem that is prevalent in Santa Barbara. So that is a very brief picture of Communitas' history and just like a tiny preview of the values that like started and shaped who Communitas is today.
Yeah. And I think, what we hope through these Facebook Live broadcasts is that we'll give people maybe who are curious about Communitas in North America just a picture of who we are and what we are about, what we're passionate about. And James just mentioned a couple of our early communities. The one that was led by his dad, Brent, who they started as a house church. They've grown quite well. Still are a house church, but I mean they've become a very mature community there in the Bakersfield area. And then Jeff Schaefer, who was one of my early friends to really open my eyes to the issue of homelessness and be involved in it. And another person who's on here was one of the early communities who's watching is Diana McCartan, who we'll probably have her on a future broadcast too. And she's doing some great stuff with homelessness up in St. Paul, Minnesota. But we have really around the U.S. probably about 13, 15 projects around the U.S., one down in Mexico that kind of floats between us and Latin America. And all of us are kind of taking a missional incarnational approach to being the church. And our vision is and our mission is to start and shape faith communities that love their neighborhood like Jesus. And that's how we take that approach. And when we say we're missional, it means that basically we start with a mission and then we see where spiritual community comes out of that. That's kind of what most people, when they think of the missional church or missional church approach to church planting, that's what we're referring to, is this idea of we focus first on mission, bring people together on mission, and then out of that we see how spiritual community, how a faith community grows and emerges that is fitting for the people in the context that we're reaching to. And so, hopefully through this, you'll get to know something about what Communitas is about. And then the other things, James, if you want to mention.
Are we gonna? We just want to talk about our purposes for Communitas, for In the Room with Communitas. As we sat down and started talking about doing something. We hadn't had to come up with a name with it at that point, but we first were talking about in the room with Communitas. We were talking about like we just wanted an opportunity to talk about Communitas's best practices, and one of the reasons we really believe in sharing our best practices is we feel a responsibility to care for the broader church, and not just like our projects, but we want to care for the like church across the globe. And we believe that some of the things that Communitas are practicing can have a positive impact on pastors and lay people everywhere. And we want the opportunity to participate in the broader church that way.
And I think we believe that in sharing our passions and our best practices will propel others' imagination. It will help others grow in their imagination of what maybe God would want to do through them in mission. When I first connected with Communitas, and actually even when I first started reading missional works like, Forgotten Ways by, Alan Hirsch and Mike Breen's book, title is slipping my head right now. But as I would read these books with this missional focus, it was kind of this validation for me, the sense that, man, this is what church should be. This is what we need to be in our context and in our country and in our local communities. And so for me, it was this validation. It just encouraged it. And, we talk about some of these best practices, and we've referenced the dynamic adventure. And basically, we see this as an adventure that kind of shows itself in a few different dynamics that throughout future episodes we'll talk about. Like that, the whole idea of starting by just embedding in the community and initiating missional activity, initiating some type of a good global or a good gospel presentation in our context. And then you start to practice what spiritual community looks for you. And it can be different in a whole lot of different places, but eventually you develop a form that works for your context. And that's what we call maturing. And then eventually you kind of stretch out a little bit more. Maybe you connect with a few other people, you network, you extend. That's hubbing and extending. These are all different things that we consider good practices of a missional community. And we call it, basically that wherever you have communion with God, you have a community of people that are growing together and they're on mission together. That's church. And it can take a lot of different forms. And then there's some values that we bring to the table that we're kingdom seeking. Like James said, we don't have to feel like everything has to have our name on it, that we want to bless the broader church with a vision of what church can be. And we're grace oriented as well. We extend a lot of grace. We really recognize our own, we don't try to think of ourselves so highly towards others. And so we want to walk graciously in our world, which I think we need a lot these days, a more gracious people that are walking in this divisive era. And we're people focused. We want to develop people, and whether people join Communitas or they don't, we want to see them grow in their living out of God's mission. And James, if you wanted to mention that last purpose.
Yeah. Two more things on our purposes that I'll share. First is just, as we talk about Communitas within Communitas, we really do have a relational emphasis, and we appreciate how much we grow and benefit from the friendships we share amongst each other. And so when we talked about wanting other people to get to know Communitas, we knew that what that meant was it had to be somewhat relational. We had to introduce people to the people who make up Communitas. And that is a big piece of what we're hoping to accomplish within the room with Communitas. We'll be bringing in lots of the people who make up Communitas NA, our friends and partners. And the last thing is we hope this serves as an invitation. We recognize that there are lots of people in the US right now who are thinking creatively about what does church look like? What does it look like to build the kingdom? And we don't want to see people alone doing that. We recognize that the kingdom thrives when we partner well and care for each other well. And so we hope that In the Room with Communitas serves as an invitation for people to consider exploring Communitas more, entertaining like what a relationship with Communitas might look like. And then just last thing on this little intro episode that I have is structure that we'll be following and the topics that we'll be hitting in the next 5 weeks. So not in the next 5 weeks. In the next 5 episodes, we're going to do, our hope is to alternate every other week on and off. But next episode, we're going to be hosting Jeff Schaefer, and he's going to be sharing about mission and the church, justice in the church. What's the church's role in seeking justice? And very excited for that. I've benefited a lot from Jeff Schaefer's wisdom. And then we're going to talk about journey groups, which is a method of soul care that Communitas practices, and we really advocate. This is one of the strengths that I really believe Communitas brings to the table, is how we're caring for our people. The following episode, we'll talk about welcoming refugees, and then the coaching model that we use. We utilize a coaching model to help people who have vision make that a reality. That has been really effective and really beneficial within Communitas. And it's another thing we're very excited. It's another tool that we're very excited to share. And then 5 episodes from now, we're going to talk about embedding and initiating. And Leon, you just touched on that briefly, but we absolutely believe that embedding and initiating is language we use for finding one's place in their community. And we'll expand on that, but we believe it's absolutely necessary to participate in building the kingdom where you are. And we also recognize that it is an early step to planting healthy faith communities. So those things we have coming up. The structure will follow week to week. We will typically have a guest. We don't tonight, but Leon and I will ask questions and give guests a chance to share their own stories and talk about ideas that we're focusing on. And then we really hope that we get to receive questions from our audience, so we can do it. We'll try to wrap up our time every week with a Q&R.
Yeah. And I think that's so I appreciate looking at the comments. We've got a few comments that came along, none of them specifically questions or anything this time around, but good to see the dialogue back and forth in this, because that's what we want to see happen. We were talking about different formats, and we're like, well, why don't we just do a podcast or whatever? We thought, well, we want to have some interaction, and Facebook Live gives us that opportunity for interaction, so that with our different guests that come up, if you got a question, feel free to just type it there in the comments, and we'll try to get viewer questions included. Thanks to everybody who joined us for this first episode of In the Room with Communitas North America. Thank you, James, for being a part of this and helping, really kind of encourage me to go this direction. And, we're looking forward to it 2 weeks from now. As we mentioned, same time, we will have Jeff Schaefer talking about justice in the church. So everybody have a great night, great couple of weeks, and we will see you again.
Thanks, guys.